Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And welcome to today's HDI webinar, The Road to Award-Winning KCS, a case study with Lowe's and Spectrum Health. I could not be more proud to feature Lowe's and Spectrum Health during today's webinar. Both organizations are winners of the 2016 HDI Knowledge-Centered Support Award. I'm Leslie Cook, HDI's Director of Membership, and I'll be your moderator today. Before we get started, I have just a few announcements. If you are experiencing any technical problems, please refresh your browser. To participate in the Q&A session at the end of the webinar, enter your questions one at a time in the window below the slides. You can download the slides from today's presentation by opening the Attachments tab on your screen, and the slides will advance automatically throughout the event. Remember that today's webinar will be available on demand shortly after the completion of this live webcast, and you'll receive an email reminder to let you know it's available. Before we get to our featured program, I want to chat with you about the importance of reward and recognition and how you can honor the high-performing teams and individuals in your organization through HDI's Industry Award Program. Recognizing and rewarding employee and team contributions and accomplishments is an important part of creating a quality culture. When employees and teams know their efforts are appreciated, it increases their self-esteem and satisfaction with their job. Their improved attitude toward their job encourages them to aim for quality and increases productivity. HDI is committed to supporting your efforts to recognize your top performing individuals and teams. We do that through our Industry Award Program. Each year, HDI awards the highest honors in the technical support and service management industry. These awards recognize professionals at all levels, from the analyst level and technician to manager, and teams of all sizes. The winners and finalists are honored every spring at the HDI Annual Conference and Expo. And of course, we're proud to have the support of our premier award sponsor, Robert Half Technology. The upcoming conference, the HDI Annual Conference and Expo, is coming May 9th through the 12th at the Gaylord National in Washington, D.C. If you're interested in nominating an individual or team for award, the deadline is October 31st, and you can see all the awards we have here on this current slide. In the fall, at the Fusion Conference and Expo, HDI awards recognize innovation and improvement in the service management industry through the Knowledge-Centered Support Award and the Service Improvement Award. The deadlines for these awards is just around the corner. I know summer seems like it's a long ways away, but they're June 30th. I don't want you to miss them. These award submissions are open now, so you can apply today at thinkhdi.com/awards. You can see the URL there at the bottom of those photos. There are many reasons why you should consider nominating a colleague, a direct report, or a team for an HDI award. I've listed the top 8 here that I've come up with. I won't go through them all today, but I do want to go over one of the most important is that winners join a network of exceptional individuals and organizations. Last year at Fusion 16, Lowe's and Spectrum Health joined that network. So joining me today to share their KCS journeys are Chris Meadows, Senior Manager of IT Support at Lowe's, and Keelan Vanderweide, Help Desk Manager at Spectrum Health. Chris Meadows has more than 15 years of service desk leadership experience and almost 20 years of experience in the support industry overall. Prior to accepting service desk leadership roles in the healthcare and retail industries, Chris served as a certified instructor for STI Knowledge, Help Desk 2000, where he trained and certified hundreds of industry practitioners in best practices. In addition to being both a certified HDI Support Center Director and STI Certified Help Desk Manager, Chris holds an EIDL intermediate certification, and professional certifications in organizational development and knowledge management. An active member of the Charlotte HDI local chapter and the HDI International Certification Standards Committee, Chris was also honored with the HDI Manager of the Year Award in 2015. Keelan Vandewider is a ballroom dance teaching help desk manager with a degree in Japanese. She has more than 10 years of experience in customer support, support center management, and team leadership in multiple industries, including retail, manufacturing, and healthcare. A certified help desk, an HDI certified support center director. Keelan is also HDI certified in KCS foundations and KCS principles. She's frequently asked to consult on continuous improvement efforts, especially as they pertain to support centers and knowledge management. Keelan is active with the Michigan Council for Women in Technology, as well as her West Michigan HDI local chapter. Now I'll hand things over to Chris and Keelan. We'll get right to it, who will share their KCS stories. Chris, I'm going to pass it on to you. Take it away.
Well, thank you, Leslie. First of all, I'd like to start off by talking a little bit about Lowe's pre-KCS condition and the state we were in before adopting KCS. So prior to KCS, our IT service desk had been struggling for years with knowledge management efforts. We had little to no knowledge guidelines and no best practices in place for knowledge whatsoever. We did have a knowledge base, but it had outdated, antiquated information in it and articles, and it was highly neglected. Our analysts relied on multiple disjointed knowledge islands, such as personal notes and files and sticky notes on the cube walls, for their resources and their go-to for information. We'd often see them up walking to other analysts for assistance and searching the internet and utilizing whatever specific knowledge pocket they had at their fingertips. Information consistency and accuracy that was provided to our customers was not at all consistent, and average call time and average handle time suffered as a result of lack of knowledge practices. Unnecessary rework was our norm in our environment, and there was definitely no cultural emphasis to treat knowledge as an asset. Analysts definitely vocalized discontent with the knowledge repositories they had, and there was no formal pipeline or emphasis to shift knowledge left to the self-help level 0 demand of our customer base. So our IT service desk leadership quickly identified that our growing business demand required us to shift and make some significant enhancements in our operating model, specifically in our knowledge base, to effectively meet that growing demand of our scope. It was deemed imperative that we go out and identify a knowledge management practice that would allow us to reach the success levels and goals to really take on the additional demand we saw coming down the pipeline for years to come. So we went out, did our homework, consulted with the Consortium for Service Innovation and HDI, attended some HDI Knowledge Center support classes, and identified KCS as our desired program. So after identifying KCS and obtaining the correct executive and stakeholder buy-in, we identified the scope of our initial adoption. That initial scope included adoption across 7 unique teams within the IT service desk department. Each one of these teams had varying cultures and leadership styles, and we began that journey circa 2012 to 2013. At that time, our service desk consisted of more than 250 staff across multiple campuses. These included call-taking analysts, management, and support staff. So altogether, as mentioned, these were 7 unique teams with unique leadership styles and cultures, supporting 21 ACD skill sets and 672 known applications. These teams were offering more than 1.6 million calls annually from our retail stores, distribution centers, and corporate offices of Lowe's. In addition to providing support requests through emails and voicemails, we process roughly 900,000 incidents through our self-help site annually as well. So it was our desire to scale KCS methodology to our service desk teams, but also we kept in mind that our journey would eventually take us beyond those teams out to the other 1,700 to 1,500 people within our IT space outside the service desk as well. So all KCS program material, permissions, and messaging was established with that scale in mind to go eventually beyond the IT service desk. So that's a little bit about our scope. I wanted to share a little bit about our strategy that we undertook. So our strategy was fairly simple. We wanted, first of all, to adopt KCS as close to the prescribed processes found in the Practices Guide as possible. You know, we had a desire to make sure we did our homework, we went to the guide, we learned as much as we could ahead of time, and we knew what the goal was, and we knew what good looked like from the Practices Guide. So that was the first part of our strategy. The second part is that we wanted to ensure that the tools that were utilized enabled the KCS practices. We knew that KCS was tool agnostic, yet it was our objective to have a knowledge base enable the KCS processes instead of our knowledge base dictating our knowledge management processes. In other words, we wanted the process to be enabled by the tool versus the tool defining the knowledge behavior. And the third thing that we recognized pretty early on is we had to start small. At the advice of the Adoption Guide and the Practices Guide, we started small by focusing on one team and only cascading to additional teams once it was clear that the team we were currently focusing on was progressing on track. Although our goal was adoption across the entire department, we anticipated and approached our efforts with the understanding that we would have team adoptions within the overall department adoption, and this really rang true as unique challenges and lessons and findings were witnessed from each team. So, started off, as many organizations do, we focused on the phase one of the adoption roadmap. Our 4 phases, and with a typical KCS adoption, the first phase is the planning and design phase. Given the breadth of our scope and the fact that we were taking this across the 7 teams, our approach was to establish a repeatable model of adoption, which could accommodate and take into consideration nuances for each team. Therefore, each team adoption was treated as a unique effort, but we also followed the same KCS project plan and execution steps for each team. So we began with phase 1, planning and design efforts, including creation of the program plan to develop the materials and the key components you see listed here on the right of this slide, including everything from a roadmap and deployment plan, communication plan, training and development delivery approach, role definitions, all the way through how we were going to integrate our tools between our incident management system and our knowledge base, which were both separate entities at the time. So moving on to the actual adoption launch for our environment, adoption activities began for us with our leaders. We knew that leadership buy-in was going to be key for us. So our adoption activities began with the leadership workshops, specifically for support team frontline leadership. These workshops focused on leaders' understanding and preparedness for KCS adoption launches, and included in these sessions were messaging for leaders, such as the what's in it for me for leaders. We concentrated on thorough explanations and really good overviews and understandings of the KCS practices and principles. Both the solve and evolve loop of KCS was included in that, but we put special emphasis on the evolve loop components of the model because we knew how important frontline leadership buy-in was. We had interactive exercises that demonstrated the value of KCS and the heavy concentration on leadership messaging to analysts. And we also emphasized and educated and managed expectations around the J-curve performance dip that can be anticipated upon initial launch with KCS activities. And so we made sure that they understood that and that they bought in to the approach. Now, one of our key lessons learned was that frontline leadership's reaction in support of KCS was one of the largest influencers of the adoption rate and success. So leadership reaction varied by team, yet the correlation remained for us that the more support the frontline leadership demonstrated through general communication and reinforcement, the stronger the KCS adoption was across each one of the teams. So we found that that correlation was hugely important. Now, we also focused on the analyst training, of course, and that was a multi-day training session and consisted of a balanced combination of process model information and where we focused on the UFA, the use it, fix it, flag it, add it activities. And we also focused on targeted messaging to those analysts. Specifically, we targeted the what's in it for them messaging, which was a little bit different than the what's in it for them messaging for our leadership. We focused on the hands-on execution of UFA in the classroom. We also did peer review of content created and knowledge article drafts created within the classroom with a focus on ensuring they knew that that content should be sufficient to solve incidents as they came in. We also performed reviews of one-on-one coaching frequency and the schedules they could expect when they went back to the floor and executed, and how often we'd be in front of them for coaching. We focused on what reporting they could see and expect to receive around KCS activity. And very specifically and very important here, we also focused on how they could progress through the KCS competency model from a KCS 1, 2, 3 level. So, and our analyst communication really did not stop there. That was just the initial wave of it. Our KCS coaches made regular intraday desk side coaching visits during the initial weeks of a team's launch. KCS coaches remained on the floor for multiple weeks after that to field impromptu questions by analysts as needed. And additionally, our coaches scheduled dedicated off-floor one-on-one time roughly every 2 weeks with analysts during the first 2 months of each team's launch to review their individual KCS reports, field any questions they have, and discuss progress and offer tips. So recurring one-on-one coaching sessions continued on a monthly basis for the first 2 months, and then on an as-needed basis thereafter that. Now, one thing that really came into view for us was that we are all adult learners when it comes to KCS. Knowing this, we approached KCS training from and UFA behavior change from a driver's license education type standpoint, meaning we knew classroom instruction was key, yet time behind the wheel at their desk with a driving instructor and coach was equally, if not more important. So that was a very, very insightful finding from us, and we highly recommend that any organization pursuing this spend the time and dedicate the time to provide that desk side coaching availability to their staff. So moving on and continuing on the adoption focus, the adoption and requires behavior shift. You know, there's several ingrained behaviors that have to change when we adopt KCS. First of all, our analysts had what we call get off the island. They had to stop using their personal knowledge islands and learn to go to that knowledge base, search early, search often, and utilize the shared contributions that were in the knowledge base. We knew analysts may have a hard time letting go of their personal knowledge repositories, so we encouraged analysts to make sure they would draft candidate knowledge. We emphasized the what's in it for them messaging and emphasized the citations and the accreditation associated with knowledge authoring and the value it could demonstrate to not only them but their peers in the organization. We encourage analysts to work closely with coaches should they be uncertain on how to populate or whether their content was quote-unquote good enough. We also emphasized a grace period. Even though we had article quality standards, we didn't want the fear of somebody getting deemed by those standards to be a hesitation for them to contribute. The other piece one of the other pieces we focused on was the performance assessment component. KCS requires leaderships to determine that particular component of the evolve loop. So we focused on contributions, whether they fixed an article, flagged an article, or added a draft or an article. And we also focused on article quality as well out of the gate. And what that really gave us was a message that, hey, this is not going away. You know, the old saying is, you measure what you manage, you measure what you measure. That was true for us. We found that by putting the data in front of them, it gave a level of certainty to our actions, and it wasn't just a flavor of the day, soup du jour type of mentality to this. This is something we're going to try. They saw the formality and also saw the benefit from it. The other piece that we can't emphasize enough to try to shift some of the behavior toward the UFA practices and KCS practices was messaging. We published monthly newsletters to highlight KCS practices, to really put people up on a pedestal for the ones that were contributing and showing value and really focused on their value proposition. We also made sure we focused on the global ownership component of contributions. So everyone that contributed to one of the articles that received the highest citation counts were highlighted. So we didn't just highlight the individual who created the article. If they published it, if they made a recommendation, they flagged it to make it better, we highlighted everyone that contributed. So this helped us champion the KCS behaviors. We also focused on monthly giveaways, and for those individuals who contributed and showed that they really were adopting things as easy as gas card giveaways really helped us kind of drive some of that behavior and incentivize individuals who might not have otherwise been incentivized to do it on their own, but it did give them some motivation. So one of the most well-received items that we did to really shift behavior as well was recognition of analysts as they progressed through our competency model. Once analysts had successfully proven their ability to adhere to KCS practices and reach the next level of competency, we recognized them in department meetings and provided them with their next level of competency award in our actual team meetings, and they really did seem to like that. So all those items helped us shift behaviors, and those are just a handful of things that we have time to cover today, because KCS is truly as much about behavioral shift to drive adoption as anything. So one of the other things I wanted to mention, and going back to the reports and the analytics that were contributed, we really witnessed how service desk analysts like analytics. So go figure. But what we saw was they appreciated us putting information and data in front of them that showed how they contributed. And we did this at the team level for leaders and also at the individual level. We showed them their participation rates, or their how often they were linking and utilizing the knowledge base, and their citation rates, how often other people were utilizing the knowledge that they contributed to the knowledge base, which really kind of brought it into perspective for them so they could see how they were really adding to the greater good of the organization and how the knowledge that they were contributing really was helping other people. So we also produce reports such as reuse versus create to really take a look at how much velocity we have with creation. And so one of the things that we focused on was making sure that we praised teams and highlighted the fact that individuals could see when they had the cross between how much they were creating versus how much they were reusing. And so our reuse rate shot up pretty quickly, as you can see based on the velocity of the green line there in the chart. And really started seeing some pretty significant numbers as far as reuse, which meant some of the rework that we had with people resolving issues and taking longer to resolve issues, because we saw the rework in the organization that was there prior to KCS, that was going away, which we were pleased to see that. So these reports, especially for leadership and at the individual, were key and helped us accelerate our adoption. All right, so I want to transition to our tools section. We had a legacy knowledge base in place when our KCS journey started, but it was full of antiquated knowledge. So we made a decision to adopt a new knowledge base and start with fresh material in that knowledge base. We knew from the practices guide one of the ditches that we wanted to avoid with our adoption was placing antiquated information that didn't follow KCS standards into our knowledge base, which is what we did. So we chose to make sure that we started fresh. We did have a grace period where people could go in and still view information that was in the old knowledge base. However, they had a certain time frame. They had to take that information, if they still used it, put it in the KCS standards and contribute it to the new knowledge base. So one of the other pieces I want to emphasize that we did, that not every organization gets to do, but we started with our ITSM incident management tool and our knowledge base integrated. And what they could do, they could execute the UFA steps at the speed of conversation by having the ability to search within the incident form, go out, pull information in from the knowledge base based upon whether they used that knowledge article, and associate that to the knowledge base. So what we found is that actually accelerated our adoption, and it gave us the ability to use knowledge at the speed of the conversation. So that was very key for us from a process integration standpoint. But what we realized is out of the gate, even though we had this in place, and we went with a new knowledge base with integration into our incident management system, we did find that you can always expect to tune what we call the article findability, or how well the search engine works. And that's one thing that we advise companies and organizations they can expect. So expect to search, to tune your search and dial that in, because what we see is some people needed re-education on the best ways to search, and some people needed to understand how the search engine works. And of course, you tune your articles as well with some of the keywords and information in there. But as customers as our analysts populated knowledge in the customer context, that helped tremendously as well. So cultural change, can't emphasize that enough, is that we really emphasize the need for leadership to recognize the value of contributions. You can't expect fears from some people within IT, because oftentimes knowledge is power. We anticipated some of those fears, and when we developed our communication strategy during our planning stage, we were ready to combat some of those fears. We heard everything from, oh, you're getting ready to outsource us, to you're replacing us with a less seasoned employee by asking us to document our knowledge, to the I'm no tech writer response. So you can be prepared to hear some of this stuff, and there will be some individuals that don't like to change, but you can combat that by continuing to show the value of contributions and really drive the cultural understanding that, hey, this is not a conspiracy theory. This is to help the organization, and there's always going to be more there for folks later. So one of the other things, we wanted to understand our cultural norms, make sure we studied the practices guide, and manage expectations. Some people thought that a knowledge base would replace the need for any and all training. Yeah, that was one of the misconceptions that we saw. We had to really combat that, and said, hey, our knowledge in KCS really does help with just-in-time training, but it's not going to replace really good training. So, and the last thing, from a cultural change standpoint, is this is truly a behavioral exercise in organizational change, behavior change. We had a little saying internally that says KCS is not a chia pet. You can't just plant some seeds, water it occasionally, sit back and watch it grow. You have to cultivate it. You really have to make sure you're out there and you're helping people learn how to drive, and really continue to evangelize and communicate and put the value proposition to drive the changes so they're sustained over time. So we started in 2012 with our journey, and we've continued to try to message that. Our next steps is we're actually in the process of centralizing everything in one tool, and hopefully will give us the ability to even take it beyond where we've gone today and continue to leverage it across more of our organization. So with that said, I wanted to transition to some of the outcomes that we saw as a result of this journey that we continue to be on even today. And this is really where we saw a lot of value with KCS. We had a significant reduction in time to proficiency across our organization. And specifically, and with some of our internal proprietary teams where we couldn't hire people off the street with that knowledge level, we witnessed some teams that had as much as a 12 months time to proficiency, believe it or not, because of how proprietary their environment was. We were able holistically across all 7 teams to bring that down to an average of a 50% time to reduction for proficiency. We saw same-day publishing that was where we had an average of 2 months prior to KCS. We were able to witness same-day publishing after KCS as a result of our adoption. Staff with the ability to contribute to knowledge base went from 5 people prior to our KCS adoption to 250 plus with inside our service desk. Our time to add knowledge went from an average of 3 to 5 weeks to get knowledge into the knowledge base to real time with draft knowledge. And we also saw a definitive delta between customer satisfaction. We saw our customer satisfaction scores go up when knowledge was used in relation to our incidents as well. So to conclude, from our perspective on the outcomes, one of the things we wanted to do from the onset was make sure we drove knowledge to the point of demand. We did follow the shift left methodology within KCS to try to drive as many self-help contacts and as much knowledge to the point of demand for our self-help site as possible. Our self-help contacts increased 46%. KCS was a good contributor to that. Today we have 850 published articles, 80 show-me-style videos for sport, and roughly 13,000 plus article views a month. We were able to decrease internally. We saw you could literally, prior to KCS, see people two or three deep waiting for assistance from SMEs at their cubes. We saw a 70% decrease in the need for staff to consult with each other and be lined up at each other's cubes. We actually baselined that prior to our launch. And 15 plus teams outside of the IT service desk also received training and guidance on KCS practices as well. And one of the things that we didn't necessarily put a number to, we did see a huge increase in analyst confidence, and they'll be the first to tell you, especially our newer folks, that the knowledge base has helped them tremendously, but more so they've loved the ability to contribute to KCS and utilize the holistic knowledge that KCS provided and afforded to us. So with that, guys, that's the end of my segment. I'm going to go ahead and transition over to Keelan. Keelan, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chris. So Spectrum Health, I just want to give a little bit of a background on what Spectrum Health is. So Spectrum Health is a healthcare provider in the west side of Michigan. Our help desk actually supports right around 25,000 employees across the organization. So our driver for our KCS initiative is unique in that for healthcare, we're really supporting all the nurses and doctors that are providing patient care in the field. So we want to make sure that not only is our documentation correct, but it's getting updated as fast as possible. So where we began. Imagine, if you will, going to Google to try to find a very simple answer to a question about Microsoft Word and finding a 20-page document that tells you everything you could possibly need to know about Microsoft Word. That was our past state. We started with extremely large documents that were very hard to navigate. So you had to find the document first, and then you had to search through the document again to try to find the answer to the question that you were looking for, which took a lot of time for our analysts to be able to support our customers. Not to mention, it would take days to weeks to do any kind of update on the documentation that we had out there in the knowledge base. So you might find out that there's an update that needs to happen to a document, and because at the time all of our knowledge documentation was owned by the third level support teams, that meant that we had to wait for them to find the time to go update that documentation for us. So it would take an extremely long time to get that documentation up to date, and in the meantime we would, run the risk of having inappropriate or wrong information going out to our customers through our analysts. The documentation was sometimes unreliable because it took so long to update these documents and to make sure we had the right information. We couldn't always trust that the document was correct. So we would end up spending more time asking an analyst and double checking with second and third level on what we were supposed to be doing before we could provide an answer or a resolution to our customers. We had a self-service page that was actually pretty cool, but no one knew to use it, and the information that was out there was not utilized by our customer base at all. We had a second level help desk, which at first when it was set up made a lot of sense. But then as they got more established, what would end up happening is that the third level support teams would think, okay, well, this is something that the second level help desk can take care of and push that work downward. At the same time, that first level help desk was saying, we don't have the time or the knowledge to take care of this issue, and push that upward to second level. So that resulted in a lot of tickets sitting in a queue that the second level help desk just could not keep up with, which caused significant delays for all of our customers and really was a big dissatisfier for not only our customers but also for our staff on the first level help desk and the second level help desk. To the first level help desk, they were seeing that model as no value add for them because they weren't actually fixing anything. They were just resolving the quick fix things that were repeating, things like password resets and resetting profiles in Outlook, but they weren't actually troubleshooting issues and trying to figure out how to fix them. So to them, they didn't really have a whole lot of investment in what they were doing, which also would contribute to the burnout that we were seeing. So second level help desk was getting burnt out because they could not keep up with the sheer volume of tickets that were coming into them. And the first level help desk would burn out because they felt as though they weren't adding any value and they didn't have anything that was theirs or any pride in what that they were doing. There was no accountability, so we could not get the documents updated in a timely manner because there really was no mechanism for us to make sure that it was a priority for people to get the documentation updated, which was a huge struggle for the help desk. And we had 8 self-service documents. So on that self-service site that no one was using, there were only 8 documents out there for them to take a look at, which was frustrating for the people who would go out there because not only were there not a whole lot of documents, but the documents that were out there weren't necessarily updated and correct for them. And then we had 647 of those very, very long 20-page or so internal documents. So we didn't know what we wanted to do. We just knew we had to do something to take care of this issue. Our scope was a little bit more narrow than Lowe's in that we wanted to focus on the help desk area first and make sure that we adjusted our own internal cleaning of our own house, if you will, before going out and trying to get the rest of our IT department to take that on. So we went to a KCS training by HDI, and we saw a picture that was very much like this one. This is one that we created to help us explain to our leadership and to the other teams what we were trying to accomplish, in that the customers really should be able to resolve a lot of their own issues and answer their own questions if we put the right documentation out in a spot where they can access it and do it quickly. Anything that could not be handled by the customers would then be handled by the first level help desk, and immediately after resolving that issue, it would be expected that the first level help desk then put the knowledge back in a place where customers could get to it, and so on and so forth. So if the first level help desk couldn't fix it, then it would go to second level, which would then push the knowledge back to the first level help desk or back to the customers depending on what the issue was. And lastly, third level would take anything that's left and then push the knowledge back up. This would ensure that, as Chris mentioned, pushing everything to the left, making sure that the documentation is getting to the correct audience, and making sure that if you have a question or an issue, you can resolve it yourself was incredibly important. So the first thing we needed to do was free up some resources to help us on the KCS initiative, because we did not have any net add FTEs, and we all felt like we were drowning. So what we ended up doing was documenting the work, starting with the second level help desk work that they were doing, documenting that, and pushing it down to the first level help desk so that they could start doing some of that work. And then we took those second level help desk employees and we transitioned them to knowledge managers. And we focused on documenting all of the issues that they were seeing coming from third level and from first level to get that into the knowledge base and make sure that the work was going to where it should be. We got KCS training for and certification for the knowledge managers, formerly the second level help desk team, and the leadership team over the help desk so that they would be able to clearly articulate why we were going down the route of KCS and help to coach and train the rest of the staff. We also certified our entire help desk in HDI Support Center Analyst to make sure, as part of that training, there was KCS training to make sure that they understood how it plugged into the rest of what's expected of them from a help desk perspective. And then we started our search for a new knowledge tool. So as part of this KCS initiative, we found that our current knowledge tool did not really support the KCS best practices, so we had to go searching for a new tool. At the same time we were doing our search for our new knowledge tool, we started creating templates to restructure our knowledge documentation so that we had a 1-to-1 ratio per issue. So I have this issue, here is the answer, rather than a 20-page document with all of the answers in it that you could think of. So we had to completely restructure our knowledge documentation to make sure that people could find the answers they were looking for as fast as possible. We worked with our internal service management team, who owns our service management tool, to allow us to design and build a new self-service page so that once we had populated documentation for our customers, then we could put out this brand new self-service page that not only is prettier and easier to use, but also has quality knowledge documentation out there for our customers. And then once we selected our knowledge tool, which was the Right Answers tool, we went ahead and implemented that. One note I do want to make here is that a lot of people think that if you find the right tool, you can fix the issues. Not necessarily true. In this particular case, as Chris alluded to earlier, you want to make sure that you have the process in place so that it can drive the tool and what the tool is supposed to be doing, rather than relying on the tool to take care of all process issues and try to fit your processes to what the tool can do. So, before I get into the outcome, I want to talk a little bit about how we did what we did. So we went a little bit different route than Chris did in that we did not start fresh with our knowledge documentation. So there were a couple of reasons why we couldn't, but ultimately what we ended up doing was taking our current knowledge-based documentation, putting it through a review and restructure and quality check, and then putting that into the knowledge base. And it was really helpful for us because what we ended up doing was using that as a practical training exercise for our help desk staff. We would take 1 to 2 of them at a time off the phones and put them with our knowledge managers for a day, and they would help them transform that documentation into the new knowledge base while teaching them how to do all of the quality checks and teaching them the more in-depth, practical, hands-on pieces of the KCS process and getting everything through and moved into the knowledge base. So once that was done, our entire team was trained in KCS or certified in KCS. We have created 6,000 documents to date. So we went from 800 to 6,000, which was a pretty big jump for us. Our internal usage, like within our IT department, after we had just done these improvements for the help desk specifically, was 16.7%. So that was without any communication, any broadcasting, any messaging. People just realized that as we improved our knowledge documentation and these processes we were going through and using KCS, that this tool is pretty cool and they can start finding a lot of the knowledge documents that they were looking for. We worked specifically with a few teams to do some partnering with them to try to do some experimentation to make sure that we were adding value with the documentation that we were putting in. One of those teams was our web team, and when we went through the exercise with the web team, they ended up seeing a 50% drop in tickets that would come to them through the help desk. So the help desk was now resolving 50% more of the tickets that were previously going to that team by following the KCS processes and helping us get our documentation in there. We were also able to decrease the number of incorrect tickets that were routed to the wrong place. We had decision trees that would guide our customers to the right process or system. So it would ask you a question, you would answer it, and then it would ask you another question, you would answer it, getting you to exactly the answer that you were looking for, rather than entirely relying on our customers to understand the question that they're asking. And we, at one point, had a 70% turnover in our help desk due to awesome opportunities within the company. And our first call resolution did not move, which was a huge accomplishment for us. When you lose something like 70% of your team, to have your first contact resolution stay the same and still be resolving the same amount of tickets is huge. Already mentioned that of the teams we partnered with, we reduced the ticket volume up to 50%. We reduced the training of our help desk staff from around 12 weeks to 6 to 8 weeks, depending on the trainees, which was a big deal for us. And then we saw the unintended outcome of the shift in culture. So what we saw was that a lot of teams that were used to running in silos and only coming to us when they absolutely had to, and hanging out on their knowledge islands, as Chris so adequately described, we would see them coming to us and asking us what we needed, asking us what they could put into the knowledge base for us, asking us how to improve their knowledge documentation, or asking us to work with them to identify where knowledge is missing, or where it's a little confusing, or where we might need a little bit more help and a little bit more documentation, which was a big deal. Our first contact resolution went from a low 60s to a low 70s right away. And we are now better prepared and informed for a lot of go-lives and upgrades. One of the struggles that most help desks will run into is that you don't know something's happening until after it's already happening. And what we saw was a shift in culture to getting us the information and the documentation ahead of time so that we could handle more of the issues for those project teams instead of letting it fill up their queues. Our company was growing. We had a lot of acquisitions that were happening at the time that we were going through our KCS processes, and we noticed that we could intake a lot more sites with a lot more people to support without necessarily growing the help desk headcount, which was a big win for our leadership team. We were much faster to address any issues that were coming up in the knowledge base, so we could all of our documentation was getting fixed in real time instead of waiting the 2 weeks to a couple months. So it was a lot easier for us to address the issues with our documentation. It's highlighted a need for global knowledge management. So our biggest problem right now is we can't keep up with the people who want to hop in and do KCS for their own teams and use our tools and have us come coach them and train them on how to do knowledge management effectively. So a lot of teams to date are coming in, which is great, and it's also helping us to drive our KCS methodology throughout not only the IS department, but also some other business departments as well. And our self-service implicit resolve, which is essentially, they didn't specifically say it solved their problem, but they didn't search afterwards either, so it's assuming that they resolved their issue. For internal, is about 1,500 issues, and for external, 582 issues in a month. This is a screenshot of our new awesome help desk self-service page. You can see our knowledge base here down at the bottom, as well as the other buttons that they use to get to the tools that they're looking for. We found that it made it a lot easier to go with simplistic so that people could use it a lot easier. This is May to December of 2016, so after we submitted our award submission. Just a couple of stats. that keep us going and keep driving us toward higher utilization and making sure that everyone that we encounter knows about KCS and understands KCS. One of our biggest ones is the total resolved incidents. You can see that within that time frame, about 9,000 of our customers that were external to IS solved their problems on their own, and about 13,000 within IS solved their own issues. So that's really what we're driving toward, is issue resolution and making sure everyone can get to the documentation as they need it and no later. So some lessons learned: involve your customers. Make sure that you are asking them what they're looking for. One of the best cases that I can tell you about is when we were doing our revamp of our self-service site. We asked them, okay, now if we could put documentation in a place where you would use it, what would you like it to look like? And one of our customers said, you know, I just can never understand why you can't just give me a search bar. And so as you saw on our self-service page, that's exactly what we gave them, one search bar. Proof is in the pudding. So we started very, very small. We have somewhere around 1,200 users in our IS department, and we didn't want to necessarily use them to test this out and work through what we were trying to accomplish with KCS. So we started within our own team, and we made sure that we perfected and did what we needed to do within our own team before really communicating and letting other people know about KCS and our new tool set that we had put into place. And to be honest, before we could even communicate it, people were asking us when they could start using it. So by producing a quality product like that and testing it within your own space, it makes it incredibly value add. Word of mouth is extremely valuable to that same point. Real change takes time. There is no beginning and end to this type of project. It is a forward-moving thing. KCS is not a project. There is no start, there is no finish. It's going to take time to get people on board and to get them to understand what's in it for me. So this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And then make sure that you choose the right tools in the processes. Start with the processes and then move to the tools, because that's going to be huge. So next steps, we're going to start spreading the word about right answers and KCS to as many people who will listen to us about it. We're going to continue to train, coach, and promote others through our KCS model. We are kicking off an in-person marketing campaign for self-service, so we're going to put boots on the ground and go out to our physicians and our nurses and show them how cool this new self-service site is and how they can find what they need. We're looking at federating search to look through some other systems. Integration with our ticketing system. So as Chris mentioned, their knowledge base is integrated with their service management system. Ours is not, so that's on our roadmap. Gamification, so making this a game for anyone who's inputting or editing knowledge documentation. And then we're going to be using our knowledge base to front end our email. So when they send us an email, instead of having to monitor a mailbox, it will fire back some top solutions that match what they put into their email. So now I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Ms. Leslie.
Thank you very much, both Keelan and Chris. We all appreciate you sharing your KCS stories. So, and now we're on to the question and answer portion of our event. There's been some great questions coming through the Q&A portal. So I will hit up the first few. If we do not get to all of our questions today, we will be posting the unanswered questions on HDI's member-only online community, HDI Connect. You can find it at hdiconnect.com. We'll get those posted. So question one, and this is directed at either presenter or both presenters. The first, and there's a set of three questions here, so I'll just go with the first one first and then number two and so on. What's your strategy for prioritizing the work on knowledge article content?
Strategy for prioritizing the work on knowledge management content. That's an interesting question. So for us, knowledge management KCS is how you solve issues. So for us, it became number one as far as getting our knowledge documentation out there for people to use and making sure that it's correct. So really, by separating our knowledge managers, our formerly second level help desk, over to knowledge management specifically, we were able to make a whole separate strategy around knowledge management and making sure that it was the forefront of someone's purpose, which is how we prioritize that.
Yeah,
And Chris, do you have anything to add there?
Yes, I would agree. From our perspective, it has to become part of that, the way you solve issues. And in our industry and what we do, having knowledge and a resolution or a workaround available when a change rolls out and breaks something is highly important. The quicker you can get it, the quicker it becomes actionable and usable, right? So our system, gladly enough or happily enough, allowed us to prioritize a specific article or an action within the workflow of our knowledge base, which is very handy. So we can actually prioritize as a high, medium, low priority for action. So that helped. But holistically and culturally, what we've got to realize is you don't know the value of knowledge at the time it's created. So something I created 5 minutes ago may be used 40 more times within the next hour by 40 more people. So it's highly important, especially when things break, right? So it's highly important that we make it part of what we do day in, day out, and that's really the way KCS is supposed to work.
Thank you, both. Next question is, do you separate training around methodology and technology to produce knowledge? In other words, do your coaches provide an overview of KCS and then train an analyst on how to use the tool that's in place to produce or update knowledge?
In my mind, for us at Lowe's, we did not separate the two. Okay, so we had both built in, but it was considered one overall training approach because to have your process integrated, to be able to be in your incident management system and leverage your knowledge, use it, fix it, flag it, add it, it's all so closely intertwined that for us, we taught around the methodology and the practices and the importance thereof, but to execute those and to really see those through, it was tied closely to the technology. So we did not particularly separate the two. It was one training.
And for all the reasons that Chris just mentioned, ours is the same way. We do it as one training in order for them to see not only in theory, like teaching the methodology, but practically how that impacts their work.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more. There are so many questions in here. That's awesome. There's 20, but we'll try to hit one more. With changes in staff and enhancements with tools, how often do you provide ongoing training to your analysts?
Ours is constantly. We have a web-based training that anyone can take at any time, even if they need a refresher. And then our knowledge manager coaches, our formerly second level, they are available any day that anybody needs anyone to come out and do any in-person training.
For us at Lowe's, it's part of the onboarding process. So as soon as somebody steps through the door, we couple the training on how to use their phone, how to log a call, all that with the initial upfront KCS training. And then we provide knowledge domain training for our KCS 2's refresher training in that space, and KCS 3's as they go through the competency progression, and we continue it on an ongoing basis as needed.
Great. So we are getting close to the top of the hour. Like I said, there's 22 questions in the queue. This is going to make for some great discussion on HDI Connect. We will be posting these unanswered questions on HDI Connect, and we'll recruit Keelan and Chris to go out on our portal and answer some questions and get some discussion going with everyone. So HDIConnect.com. If you're not an HDI member, go to thinkhdi.com/membership and join us. It's only $2.95. If your organization is planning its own award-winning KCS initiative, HDI can help. Visit thinkhdi.com/KCS-V6 to learn more about our KCS Principals certification. The first 50 to sign up for KCS V6 certification training get special pricing. Reserve your spot today. And again, I want to thank you, Chris and Keelan, and thanks to all of you for attending today. Please remember to rate this webinar before you leave. Your feedback helps us make improvements to our webinar program. We look forward to seeing you in March at our webinars. We have another award winner coming up. We have March 30th, the Pursuit of Award-Winning Service Improvement, a case study from CGI Federal, who is our Service Improvement Award winner for 2016. And you can remember to register for those events at thinkhdi.com/events/webinars. Remember, if you would like to learn more about the HDI Knowledge Centered Support Award or any of our other awards in our program, visit thinkhdi.com/awards. And last but not least, for news and announcements from HDI, connect with us on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and on our HDI members-only community site, HDI Connect. You can get there by just going to hdiconnect.com or connect.thinkhdi.com. On behalf of HDI, thanks for your time, and I wish everyone a wonderful day. And thank you again, Chris and Keelan.
Thank you.
Thank you.